Hi, everybody. We're going to talk about, well, the title is Level Up with Copilot, so we're going to talk about how you can use Copilot to level up your career at any level. I really like audience interaction, so I'm going to start with a few questions. The first question is, the other day I wrote this tweet that says, wrote this tweet with Copilot. I want your thoughts. Do you think I actually wrote it with Copilot, or I just opened up the Twitter app and wrote that tweet? So do a thumbs up if you think it's true, or a thumbs down. Thumbs up? It's okay if you do a thumbs down. Okay, cool. I love to see skeptics. Y'all said maybe. Cool. All right, we'll see. All right. Then my other question is, can you use GitHub Copilot to cultivate your engineering career at any level? You think it's true, or you're like, nah? Okay. People are saying, yeah. That's good. Cool. All right. Next. So, hello? Where's my slide at? Oh, wait, there we go. So, the things we're going to cover in this are what is GitHub Copilot. We're going to talk about how to use GitHub Copilot. We're going to explore if it can level up your career at any level. I'm going to talk a little bit about how it personally helped me, and we'll answer if you can use it to write tweets with Copilot and maybe some GitHub actions, because I know we have DevOps people at this conference. Just a few, right. Before I go any further, I will introduce myself. My name is Rizel. I'm a developer advocate at GitHub, and I was a software engineer before that for about 3 years. I'm also an advisor, and I was a director at a nonprofit called G Code, which teaches women of color and non-binary people of color about code. And okay, I have to change this slide. I was addicted to Twitter, but it's changing, so. All right, but if you do want to connect with me, my handle is Black Girl Bites. That's my handle on practically any social media platform except for Twitch. I locked myself out of my account, and then I just made a new one called Black Girl Bites 1. All right, so let's get into it. What is Copilot? For folks who have not heard of it yet or haven't used it, it's essentially an AI peer programmer that helps you to write code faster with less work. And it's not magic. I know when it first came out, a lot of people started freaking out. They're like, oh my gosh, is it reading my mind? Or stuff like that. And sometimes it does feel like it is, but it's not magic, and it won't always spit out perfectly well-written code or up-to-date code. Sometimes it has more data from an older API, and I just like to be honest with people about that type of stuff, because why talk about something and not be honest? And if you're still having a hard time envisioning what this truly looks like, I liken it to the Smart Compose feature in Gmail. And you probably have had this experience before where you're typing an email and then it gives you some suggested words. For example, in that screenshot right there, somebody is writing to Jacqueline about Taco Tuesday. And they're like, hey, Jacqueline, haven't seen you in a while. And then Smart Compose comes in and suggests that they want to say, and I hope you're doing well. So, under the hood, what's happening is GitHub Copilot is drawing context from your comments and your code, and it's suggesting individual lines and whole functions instantly. GitHub Copilot's actually powered by something called OpenAI Codex. And I think by now people are probably pretty aware of OpenAI because of their DALL-E AI image, yeah, their DALL-E image AI generation tool, and then also ChatGPT, which everybody's using. But a little bit, what is going on with these slides? There we go. But at first, I didn't really know what OpenAI Codex was, so I did a little bit of research. I already knew it was an AI research lab, but I still didn't know what Codex was. So I looked it up, and I realized, okay, it's just a machine learning model that OpenAI created that translates natural language into code. So, a little bit about it. It's basically another version of GPT-3, and if you don't know what that stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3, and that uses deep learning to produce human-like text. It's actually used by a lot of your favorite apps, like Duolingo uses it for grammar correction, and the biggest difference I've seen between GPT-3 and Codex is that Codex has been fine-tuned for programming. So we're gonna do a little interactive thing. I think by now a lot of people have played around with the OpenAI API and the playground and examples, but we'll do it together because I love to interact with the audience and I don't want to just talk at you. So we are going to go over to, if I could type, let me zoom this in. Actually, I think y'all could see it. So OpenAI has a couple cool examples to show you like what applications it could build, or you can build with it. And I just like to show this because it helps you to understand the technology behind GitHub Copilot. So one of the examples that's my favorite is the movie to emoji converter. What this does is it converts movie titles to emojis. So we can see, let me wait for this to load. Oh, come on. It's coming, I think. If not, I do have screen records, but it's less fun if we're not like doing it together. All right. If this last try doesn't work, I'll just show the video. Yeah. Okay. I will show the video. Good thing I have some backups. That's sad though. Okay. So with this movie to emoji converter, I'm gonna press play, and I'm gonna go click movie to emoji and open it up in the playground. As we can see, they have a couple examples of how we can use it. We can see the first one is Back to the Future. They have a young man, an old man, a car, and a clock to represent Back to the Future. And then let's see what it gives us for Star Wars. So if we generate it, we got like a star, and I'm gonna pause this because I'm going a little fast. A star, a rocket ship, and like, I don't know what that is, a satellite or something. And I decided to try out a couple of my own. One of them that I wanted to try out was The Devil Wears Prada. So let's see what it generates for that. I'm gonna submit it, and we can see like it's a lady dancing in a dress, a lipstick, and some shoes. So that seems pretty accurate to me. Good job, OpenAI Codex. I want to just see one more. I just want to see if like this last one works, just in case. Oop, we don't need to see that. Just to move to color, because I want to talk to y'all. So, boo, conference Wi-Fi. Okay. Anyways, I'll move to the next one. So, this video is an example of their mood to color generation thing or example. So basically what you can do is you can, and I'll pause it before we keep going faster. Basically what you do is you describe a color, and then it generates a hex code for you. So we can see the example it already has for us is a blue sky at dusk, and here it generates like the hex code hashtag 00336. So let's put it in Google or something to tell us if that's actually the color. So I'm gonna paste it in. And that does look like a bluey dusk to me. And I'll do a couple more examples because I find these pretty fun for me. So there's another one, and I'm gonna try out like a basketball. Hopefully it's the right shade of orange. So I'm gonna press submit and see what happens. And I'm gonna search in Google again to get that result. Paste. And that pretty much does look like the basketball orange that I think of. And then the last example is of like a sunflower. So let's see if it gives us like a golden yellow that I'm thinking of for sunflower. So we paste that in. And pretty much on the nose. Of course, since I recorded this, it would be. But I would have loved to try it out with y'all and see where it makes mistakes and stuff like that. And then the last example I have is just to show it with actual code, how it interacts with code and not just words. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna write a comment that says write a binary search algorithm, and hopefully it generates a function for me. So it actually even just finished my comment and it generated the function. So hopefully you can understand. And it also generated comments in between each lines of the function or each line of the code. So I think that's pretty cool, and I hope that shows you a little bit more about like the technology that Copilot is using if you weren't aware of it. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, so kind of how it works is what's happening is you, the user, types in Visual Studio Code or whatever editor that you have. You can be typing in NeoVim, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, or a JetBrains IDE. And what it's going to do is just going to send that data just for that moment to OpenAI Codex. OpenAI Codex is going to come back with a suggestion to you, and you can choose to accept or reject that suggestion. It's not keeping the data forever. It's just keeping it for that moment in between of you accepting that suggestion or rejecting it. And here's a couple of features. This is the most common one that you probably already know about and you've seen me show like a couple times so far, is the predictive code feature, where you write a comment and then it starts writing some code for you, or you write a first line of a function or a variable or something and it continues to write the code. We also, come on, okay. Okay, cool. We also have the view more suggestions feature, which I think is like the most helpful feature in Copilot. At first, when I started using Copilot, I was so annoyed with it. I was like, oh my gosh, it is not suggesting anything that I want, and I wish it had an option that I can see other suggestions that it was going to give me. So I told the product manager, I was like, what if they had that? And he was like, Rizal, it already exists. I was like, oh, I'm very embarrassed. But basically, all you do is that initial suggestion it gives you, you hover over it before you accept it, where it's like in gray words. You hover over it and it'll pull up a little tab for you that says like accept suggestion, or do you want to see the next suggestion or previous suggestion. And you can also choose that open in GitHub Copilot option, and it'll open up all the possible suggestions it was going to give you. We also have Copilot Labs, which is a separate extension, but it comes complementary with Copilot Access. And one of the a couple of cool things that Copilot Labs does, allows you to translate a code snippet from one programming language to another. So here we have this code snippet of like a binary search algorithm that I wrote in JavaScript. If I press translate code to Python and ask Copilot, it will generate that same code snippet, but into Python. Another useful thing within Copilot Labs is that it allows you to get an explanation of a code snippet. And I think that's really helpful if you're like exploring a new code base, or you see your coworker write a line of code and you're like, what is that? So if you just highlight the code snippet, you'll be able to see an explanation. And I zoomed in a little bit because those words are small. I'm not even sure if you all can see it clearly. I can't see it that clearly from here. That sucks. Sorry. But can you see it better here? Okay, cool. Basically, it says on the first line, it declares two variables, low and high, which will be used to represent the start and end of the search. Second, initialize low to 0 and high to the length of array -1, and so on and so forth. I will stop if anyone has any thoughts or questions or anything they want to interact with. If not, I'll keep going, but I'll just wait for like a couple seconds. What's up? I believe it has a specific list that it could support, but it's generally a lot of languages that it can support. I have to get you that after, if that's okay. Cool, cool. I'll move on. So, oh, what's up? It's not free. Okay, so it's free in certain cases, and that's okay. Um, so, we do have a free trial, and if you're an open source maintainer or you're a student, it's free for you. But yeah, are you a student? You look pretty happy. Okay, so it's free for you. Nice. All right, I'm gonna move on, and I'll do another check later on. So where it's available in Visual Studio Code, JetBrains, NeoVim, and Visual Studio as well. Also, we have a feature for folks who might be nervous about it matching public code. There's about a 1% chance that Copilot will match public code, but if you wanted to make sure it's a 0% chance, in your settings, you can go to like the GitHub Copilot section and choose block to make sure you get like 0% chance that it's going to match any public code. Also, GitHub is working on a feature that it's going to alert you that how am I describing this? If 150 characters or more are matching public code, it's going to tell you that it does match some public code, and you can decide if you want to accept or reject that, just so you can make more informed decision. Couple other things, we made a couple improvements to the codex model, so now it's a bit faster and it um, can give like better suggestions to you. We also added in like an AI security setting so that it helps to limit some secrets that might pop up. Sometimes GitHub Copilot might generate like API token or something like that. So now we're able to like block that for you. And now you might be saying, okay, Rizal, you've been talking about all the features of GitHub Copilot. Stop trying to sell it to me. How is this useful for me? So I'll talk about it. But first, I want to know from y'all, what are some ways that you want to improve as a software engineer? Like, what are some goals that you have? Ship code faster? Let's go. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, exactly. Learn new language, learn new thing, ship code faster. What about you? Oh, what'd you say? Learn Rust? Okay, let's go. Learn, write tests. Let's go. Thanks, y'all. I love the interaction. So, you have another one? Yeah, I love that. Me too. Low key. So I'll share some of my specific goals as a software engineer. I want to, like y'all said, I want to be able to code faster and cleaner. I want that, like, whether I'm a software engineer, developer advocate, whatever, I pick up a ticket, someone gives me the task, I finish it, and everyone's like, wow, Rizal is so smart, and look at this code, it's mad clean. Like, I'm like, exactly, right? I also want to be able to write good documentation that if I left or I wasn't there that day, people won't be looking at my code and be like, what is this? Rizal, like, really messed us up here. I want to be able to be a good mentor and mentee, and I want to be able to gain understanding for new concepts quickly. And I think that's pretty similar to a lot of the stuff that you all mentioned, and I believe that so far, Copilot has been helping me do all of those things, and it continues to help me do those. And I will show you how. So, in terms of coding faster and cleaner, Copilot is really, really, really excellent at recognizing patterns. So if you're using an API, creating an API, writing unit tests, Copilot really picks up on that kind of stuff. Also, it's good with syntax. Particularly, I really like it for regex because I tend to spend like an hour trying to find out how to, I'm like D minus question mark. I'm like, I really don't know, or I'm like in a regex playground for way too long. I love that I can just write a comment and it'll generate the regex for me. And I want to give y'all a top tip. Copilot works with best with clear, understandable comments. That's what'll give you the results that you want, and it really won't hurt because if an AI can understand your code, then a whole human really could understand your code. So I'll talk about my personal experience. I feel like I write messy code. And I have given this talk to my friends, and they're like, oh my gosh, Rizal, don't say that. But I do write messy code, it is true. And I always go back and like refactor it. But because I write messy code, when I joined GitHub, like it was like 2, 3 months in. And my team was like, oh, we want you to partner with the VS Code team at Microsoft and write a VS Code extension. And I was like, oh my gosh, now they're gonna see my code. It's so messy. I'm so nervous. I've never even written a VS Code extension before, but I wrote it, I put it in a repository, and I sent an email to the VS Code people, and then I was ready to get like a really bad email, like let's fix this up, and I was really surprised that one of the principal developer advocates got back to me, and he was like, code is gorgeous, so easy to read and well commented. I was like, what? Me? Okay. And I think like one, I probably should give myself better credit on my writing code, but also I do think GitHub Copilot kind of pushed me to be more clear with what I wanted because I didn't know how to write a VS Code extension. I leaned really heavily on GitHub Copilot, wrote a lot of comments, so it made it really clear on like what was going on in each function. Also, in terms of productivity, uh, well, these words are supposed to be white. You're supposed to see this saying psychological safety and confidence, morale, and performance. Sorry about that. But basically, in addition to productivity, I do think that GitHub Copilot gives me a bit of psychological safety. And if y'all aren't familiar with that term, it's basically feeling safe to like ask questions or put out ideas on your team without like feeling like you're gonna get in trouble or laughed at. In my first few years as a software engineer, I really didn't have that. So I kind of developed like a toxic relationship with asking for help. But I think that GitHub Copilot has helped me like feel more confident that I'm going in the right direction. That way I'm more confident to be like, hey team, like here's what I started with. Can you help me to go further? All right. I also have like a little top tip trick for y'all. Something that works best for me is I'll deactivate GitHub Copilot when I'm laying down the initial structure of my project, and then I'll turn it back on once I have a pattern going. Everybody might like be able to develop their own strategy, but this is just what works for me because sometimes when I'm typing and GitHub Copilot starts interrupting me, I get really distracted and frustrated. So just a tip for y'all to try out. Here are some examples in the wild that I found of GitHub Copilot working really well. Here is Mill Mike Dev on Twitter. He used Copilot to translate some simple strings into some simple strings into different languages. So basically, he's using the words answer, question, and date to translate them into French, Japanese, Spanish, just by providing the language code in an array. And I thought that was pretty cool. Also, like I mentioned, it's really great at regex. So we can see here, all I write is validate a phone number. I start writing a little bit of a variable, but after that, all I'm doing is tabbing. And I was like, no way this works, so let me just double check if it actually works. So I ran it in my console, and it said it was true. Also, one of my favorite things that might be a little bit overlooked, I think GitHub Copilot is good if you speak English as a second language. I feel like code is really American English centric, and I just think about all the people that come from a different country or speak a different native language, and now they have to learn the word function and loop and all that. And even me, I make spelling mistakes all the time, so I can only imagine how annoying it is. And even if you're like Canadian English or British English, I can only imagine if you wrote the word color in CSS and now you're trying to figure out why is it not working, and it's because you have a U in there or something like that. So I tried it out with my friend Ramon. He was like, do you think like if you wrote a Spanish comment, if it will like spit out the right code? And I was like, okay, let me try it out. So essentially I wrote a comment that says like import the needed libraries for this program. And on the next line, it suggested Tweepy, which is exactly what I wanted. Here is a little video example of me using writing in Spanish. What am I trying to say? Yeah, I'm writing a comment in Spanish to create a rock, paper, scissors game. So basically, let's do this. Cool. Basically, on the first line, I say write a rock, paper, scissors game in Spanish, or not in Spanish, but I wrote it in Spanish. And then I say import the random module. It does that. Then after that, I'm literally just tabbing. It says like define the main function, and then I say, cool, yeah, let's do that. I wait a little bit for it to actually generate the logic for the code. It does all of it for me. Like, crazy, right? And then after that, I say, let's call the function, and I run it, and I was like, no way this works. Let me just double check. I can't trust it. So I run the file. So I did like Python 3, and then I write the name of it, and it prompts me like enter 1 for rock, 2 for paper, 3 for scissors. And mind you, I do not know Python. Like I only write Python with Copilot. Yeah, so Copilot's pretty cool. Also, talking about using Copilot for documentation, like I said earlier, Codex is fine-tuned for programming, so I'm not gonna like strongly suggest it for like writing a lot of stuff, but I do think it's good if you're adding code snippets into your documentation. So I found some examples from my friend Hayden Barnes, or Unix Terminal on Twitter. He said, Copilot continues to blow my mind even when writing documentation. So he's writing some like basic install requirements, and he says on Seuss, do this, and before he could even type, Copilot suggests the command that you need to run to install it on Seuss. Another example, which I thought was mind-blowing, is a principal developer advocate at Microsoft admitted that they used Copilot to write half of the static web app CLI documentation, and I thought that was pretty amazing. Okay, other examples of or ways it's helped me reach my goals. So on being a better mentor and mentee, I will admit to y'all, I think pair programming is helpful, but I do not like it. I'm a very like anxious person, so I get really worried when I'm typing with somebody. I'm like, oh my gosh, they saw me spell a word wrong or whatever, and I get like overly focused on that rather than like the actual logic. So I found Copilot really helpful in like, okay, now I don't have to worry about the syntax. I can focus on the logic and be a valuable like peer programmer and actually help. And then on the flip side, as a mentor, I teach a lot of people like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, like all the JavaScript things. But sometimes they go and like get a job and they're writing C sharp, and then they come back to me and they're like, "Hey, I need help," and I'm like, "I do not know what that says. I'm sorry." But I've used Copilot Labs to like highlight some code snippets that they've sent me, look at the explanation of what's going on, translate it into the language that I would more understand so I can give them like better feedback on which direction they should go in. Here's an example, again, of it just explaining things. So here is like a file I have called createenv.js. I wouldn't suggest highlighting a whole file with Copilot just because it works better with code snippets, but this file is really small. So that's what I did here. So I highlighted it. Um, well, first I opened Copilot Labs, then I highlighted it. And then I'm going to ask Copilot to explain what is going on in this code. And the results say that basically it's checking to see if an environment variable called nextAuthSecret exists. And if it doesn't exist, it'll generate a random string and write it to my .env file. So that made a lot more sense to me than whatever I was looking at here. Um, Again, we have this binary search algorithm just so you could see it in real time and not that screenshot of me using it to just translate it into Python. So here it is in JavaScript. I'm going to do ask Copilot to translate it into Python. And after a little bit, it does it for me. Cool, cool. And then, I don't need to look at this for that long. Talking about gaining context for new concepts, I do believe it's helped me. This is going to sound a little unorthodox, but I have used it to study for interviews. Sometimes when I get on like a leak code hard problem, all of a sudden I'm trying to solve it, and then all of a sudden I'm watching Netflix, or I'm like lying down in my bed texting. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. But it has, you too. Nice. I would love to hear like after how you use ChatGPT for it. That's cool. Yeah. For me, I like used it to actually solve the problem. Then I deleted the code. I'm not like gonna actually like copy it straight up, but I just wanted to get a better understanding of how I could have approached the problem. Deleted it, and then I tested myself to be like, okay, how would I approach this now that I've seen an actual solution, instead of like just Googling or getting bored and going on Netflix. Again, just reiterating that I do think it's good if you go into a new code base for an open source project or a new company. Maybe it's in a different language that you're not familiar with, and using that explain feature to gain a little bit more insight. And I also think it's been helpful for me with demos as an advocate. A lot of times I do have to like demonstrate things in languages that I'm not really familiar with. One example is I might have been like less than 6 months into working at GitHub, and the Twitter DevRel team was like, hey, can we get someone from GitHub to show how Copilot works with the Twitter API? And I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds cool. And then when it was like a day before, they're like, but don't forget, you got to use it using Tweepy, and that's a Python library. And I was like, oh, I've never written Python before, and now I got to write it in front of a lot of people. But I took some time to like just create a demo, and it took me 30 minutes, and that's just me celebrating on Twitter, being like, wow, I was able to do it. If people don't get it, there's this meme of Usher, and it was like from last year. Usher saying like, "Watch this." So that's me saying like, I don't know how to write Copilot, and then Python, and then Copilot helped me. So what we're gonna do? Let me see the time that we have here. 5 o'clock. We have time. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use Copilot to write a tweet, and then we're going to create a GitHub action that, well, let's do the tweet first and see how much time we have, or if the internet even connects. Do-do. So, just to let y'all know, some background. Uh, Give me a second. Failed to load. Okay. basically, I have this opened in a code space. So if y'all don't know what code spaces are, really quick, it's your IDE in a browser. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a file called send tweet. How am I going to type into this? Mm. Send tweet. Thanks, Kadesha. You're the bomb. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use GitHub Copilot to help me write a tweet with Copilot. So first, I'm going to write some context at the beginning of the file, just letting it know what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to say send a tweet to Twitter. I can't spell with Tweepy. So next thing, and can y'all see it clearly? Should I zoom in more? Oh, sorry. Cool. And I did see a tweet earlier that said I should be using like white light mode and not dark mode for demos, so I will keep that in mind for the future. But also, I'm going to import Tweepy here because that's the next suggestion. I don't need that. Now I need to connect to the Tweepy client, so hopefully this works. And it's suggesting something that is from the older Twitter API version 1, so that's not necessarily what I want. Let me see if from version, the second suggestion it gives me is better. Not really. I will give it a little bit more context. Consumer keys and access tokens used for Tweepy.client. So, not that. Tweepy.client. Hopefully Copilot starts giving me stuff. And I'll give it some more context, so just so y'all know, instead of saving my tokens in like a config file or an M file, because every time I do this demo, I accidentally show all of my keys, I saved it in a repository here. And they have like this code spaces secret section, which I thought was cool. So here I saved like the access token secret, consumer key, and all that. So I'm going to try to see if Copilot can actually help me out. Sometimes when I do demos, it decides to not work, but let's see. Authentication, and then I'll tell it it's saved in code spaces, secrets. Okay, hopefully this does the thing. There we go. So we want the consumer key, the consumer secret. I actually think I called it something not that close, consumer secret key. It's doing it. Ugh. I'll just put it at the end. Consumer secret key. Cool. Next line, access token, that's perfect. Access token secret. And I will double check just to make sure if I got everything. Access token, Okay, perfect. Next thing I'm going to do is I actually want to create a tweet or a variable that holds the tweet in it. And what do I want to say? I wrote this tweet with Copilot, and I'm at the Scale conference right now. Create a variable with tweet of text that says, not hello world, but I wrote this. I should word wrap this, but too late. Copilot, and I'm at ScaleConf. So on the next line, because I gave it so much details, I'm pretty sure it should be able to do this without me typing the rest. Okay, there we go. Did it. And now I actually want to send a tweet. So let's see what it gives me. Again, because it has more data from the Twitter API v1, and I'm using Twitter API v2. This is not exactly what I want. So I'll give it a little bit more context. I'll delete this, and I'll say with client dot create tweet, and let's see what it does. Cool. I already know I have to pass in this, and let's see if it works, y'all. So people who said it might not work, we will disprove or save. We'll see what happens. Let's see. Send tweet. Only thing is I forgot to import OS, and Copilot already knows. Perfect. So we're going to go ahead and run this one more time. And I think it worked. I should have printed out the response, but we can go on my Twitter and see if it's actually there. Uh, Come on. I'm gonna I'm gonna go on my phone. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I was just gonna grab my phone. Here it is. It says I wrote this tweet with Copilot and I'm at scale conf. So it did work. Big Woo. Let's go. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Kadesha. So I was because of time, I have like way more demos, so I'm not gonna do the one sending it to Mastodon, because it's essentially the same concept. But I will show the GitHub action. Ooh, somebody liked it. Thanks. um, Let me go back. All right. So I already recorded this because I wasn't sure about time and internet. But basically, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to use a GitHub action, not this one, to publish this Docker image to or publish this as a Docker image to GitHub's container registry. So y'all can see that it also works with GitHub Actions. And sorry that it's small, but I can try to narrate. Basically, I'm moving over to here. I already created a Docker file for it. And then I'm going to create a YAML file in my github.workflows folder. That's where all GitHub actions go. And it'll trigger all the things that are in that type of folder. So I'm going to go ahead and create a file called publish.yaml. Okay. Now, next thing I'm going to do is just write a comment so it can have context of what I'm doing. I press enter, and still didn't give me anything, but I see like the little spinning at the bottom. I don't know if y'all could see it, but right here, GitHub Copilot spins when it's thinking. So it's starting to fill in the stuff for me. Yes, I do want the action to trigger when I push it on main. Essentially, I didn't have to type anything for any of the logic of this action. I'm going to just push it up to my repo and see if it works. So put in my commit message. Still typing really slow. Cool. And then I'll push it. And now I'm going to go over to my repository. We'll see the actions actually running. And I will skip ahead, like spoiler alert, it works. Like, we don't need to see this. Okay, now I'm gonna go over to like my packages, and they show up like on the side of my repository to see if it actually got published. And yes, it did. And we can see that a minute ago I pushed that Docker image up there. So, woo. Thank you. Skipping this, and then also I did think about like, okay, sending a tweet with Copilot is not really that useful because you could just open your phone or your computer and go to twitter.com or the Twitter app. But I did think maybe this like could be useful if you want to alert. Like, I'm really into open source, so if you want to alert everybody every time you have a good first issue to make it easier for new contributors to find your project and to contribute to your project. So I created like a workflow or a GitHub action that essentially runs the Python file that we created earlier every time you label an issue a good first issue. If you all can't see it, really sorry that it's small, but basically what it says is when the issue is labeled, let me just check the time too on where I'm at. Good, perfect. So when the issue is labeled, it'll get triggered, and it'll check to see if the label name is good first issue. It'll grab the link for that issue, and then it'll run the file. It'll install Tweepy and run the file and pass in all those like access tokens and secrets that we had, and the results would be like me tweeting out, this is a good first issue with the actual link to the URL. So we did hello, presentation board. So we did see, I hope I was able to prove to y'all that you can send tweets with Copilot and you can use it to level up your career. I have a few extra things to show y'all. Just stick around a little bit. So I also wanted to let y'all know, if you wanted to learn more about GitHub Copilot, I did write a blog post on GitHub's blog called 8 Things You Didn't Know You Could Do with GitHub Copilot. It goes over a little bit more examples than I showed in this talk. And couple last things I wanted to talk to you about. So we saw that GitHub Copilot can help you brainstorm, jog your memory, retain focus. But what about other people who we don't often think about, who may not be able to like type because of physical dexterity, or maybe they're visually impaired? We have a team at GitHub called GitHub Next. It's a team of researchers and engineers that are working on like solving different problems that we're not often thinking about. So we created this thing called Hey GitHub. It's a voice-activated AI peer programmer that lets you code with your voice. I have a demo. Excuse it for a little bit because I do like narrate most of it, but that demo was for people who are like visually impaired, so I wanted them to know like what was going on. Hopefully you could hear it as well. Can y'all hear that? Not really. Dang. Mm, I don't know how you would hear it, but I will. I'll just keep playing it. It wasn't really much louder. Is that helping? I'll stop it. I just, I cool. Hopefully y'all heard that. But if you're like in the back and you're like, I really couldn't hear. Oh yes, what's up? Does it verbalize error messages? I don't think it does yet. Well, I don't know. I haven't tried that. That's actually a good question. Because it probably should, right? Maybe it does. I haven't tried that, and that's like a really good question. Yes. Like to lay out the structure of the project or the folder. Gotcha. Okay, I don't think we're there yet, but I know the GitHub Next team is working on something called Copilot for your code base, so maybe that will introduce it. But I don't think we're there yet. Right now, it just like has the context of the like current open files that you have. But that's like I would love to see that. That would be bomb. Yeah. Mm. Oh, I mean the Hey GitHub the voice activated thing. Oh, just in general. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Okay, gotcha. I know it. So I'm gonna like answer in two parts. I know it. Hey GitHub, you can like the voice activated one. You can ask it questions and it'll like respond to you. With Copilot, kind of. I think it more like follows like the patterns that you have. So like if you start with using like if you like did a get request or something like that, and then it will get an idea of oh here's how you would do a post request or here's how you would do like the next thing. So you can write a comment of what you want to do once it sees like an example of like the first thing you did. Mm. I think the more context you give it, whether it's in the comment or the function itself, it could do that. But it's like you have to make sure like you're super clear in terms of the context of how it like generates it for you. But I don't want to say like guaranteed yes it'll do it. Like kinda yes, if that helps. And I hope I answered it right. Yes. Yeah, it does go well with that. And actually, you just reminded me of the second answer I was going to tell him. I was going to say that I would probably use ChatGPT more for like if you're going to ask it a question of give me all these things. But I do think I have used like ChatGPT and Copilot together to like help me to solve problems. I hope I answered your question right. Cool. Um, just to end, this QR code will lead you to GitHub Next so that you can get a better understanding of what we're working on with GitHub Copilot and the different experiments that we're using. So we have like GitHub Copilot, Copilot Labs, and Hey GitHub. We even have in the works, or you can start signing up for the wait list for it, is like using Copilot for your CLI. So if you were like writing a bash script or something like that, or you were like, oh, I forget how to rebase or use git bisect, you can use Copilot CLI to help you with that. Yeah. Oh, I think so. Yes. Thank you. Yes, there are. Thank you. There is within Copilot Labs. They have like um, I hope I'm answering this right. I know they have like the debugging. They have a couple of things, right? So I only showed like the translation and the. Let me see if I can open this for y'all so I can remember off the top of my head. Here's Copilot Labs, and I think I only talked about like the explanation and language translation feature, but they also have like brushes, and maybe it's because of my internet, but they have like debugging, they have like making the code more readable, adding like more documentation or comments, better comments to your code. Let me see if I can refresh it and if it'll help us, and creating unit tests as well. uh that's it for me though. Thanks for listening to me. Oh, and yeah, I'm here to answer questions. Go ahead. I think I just let me see. I used the Twitter one just because it seemed fun, but I think it does have context of those as well. Um, it hmm. Let me. I want to double check before I answer that for you. Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna double check real quick, and then I'll answer you after. Anybody else with more questions? Yes. Yeah. Oh, gotcha. I use them for code spaces. So I can't, if I use this in Visual Studio Code, it probably wouldn't work, but they do. So just to be like more clear, there in each repo you have like code spaces secrets. You also have action secrets. So what I did was like okay. Basically, I opened the repo up. They have this button that says open in code spaces, and the secrets are available inside of that code space. And a code space is just like your IDE inside of a browser. So it's not going to be accessed outside of that. And it's mostly more for like sandbox like projects, if that helps. Not really, no. But if you opened up your repo in a code space, you could run it like how we saw. Yeah. Any more questions? Since we have like 8 minutes left, or thoughts? Yeah. So, okay, so I don't want to speak on like the legal side of things, just but I do know that like one GitHub is trying to like make it free for like open source maintainers so that like they are getting use of that, and then also um, they are working on that feature, like I said, where it'll let you know if it does match public code, and like there's like a 1% chance that it did match public code. So I could talk to you after. Yeah. Code Spaces, it is free. Yes. It has it has sorry, I could just hear it almost break. It has you should go to you should go to Jay's talk after this if you want to learn more about code spaces. Thanks for reminding me also. I know you asked, so you can learn more about code spaces there. You get 60 hours free of code spaces per month. And if you're a student, I believe you get, or a teacher, you get like 180 hours free of code spaces per month. Yes. Hmm. That is a good question. Huh. I only know that we have like Copilot for business, so you can give like individual licenses to each person in your org. But I don't, I think it's the license is per user, whether it's the individual one or the business one. So I don't know if that's possible yet, but I do want to bring that up to my team. Yeah. Yeah. But that's, I'm glad to have you in the audience. Yeah. Yeah, I used it to write React before and Next.js. I've never written Django, but I just have fun with the Python examples because I'm like learning Python. So I'm like, oh cool, I'm doing it. Yeah, but it does work with those. Yes. Wait, I couldn't hear you. You said how much code is it? As much as Oh, I think it gets better with I think with the more code you have within your file or your project that's like open, it does get better, like from my experience, because it has more context. Rather than just having a blank file, it's like, what am I supposed to do? The more context, it's like, oh, I got it. But I don't think there's like a limitation to how much code that Copilot's going to write for you. Yes. This old. Uh, my coworker said, talk to him. Thanks. Cool. Any just double check in? Last questions? Last thoughts? How do y'all feel after? Are you like Copilot seems cool, or you're like it's whack? You're like it's cool. Okay. Yeah. Use that. Everything that's free. I use it. Cool. Thanks, y'all.